over, not a financial advisor or a financial professional of any sort. All opinions that I express in this video are mine and do not represent those of any company or any other individual. I currently hold a long position in Tellurian, so this video should be for your entertainment purposes only. Because I could be wrong about everything I say in this video, you need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. So, Tellurian reported their earnings yesterday, and I'm going to get right into it. Let me just say up front real quick, if you are the type of person where you've already read the 10Q and all the exhibits, the attachments, like, you probably won't learn anything new today. Just setting expectations for folks. So, going through this, my first impressions when I'm reading through this, real quick, I'm going to go through the actual operations because that's interesting, and then we'll get on to what this, some of the implications and the insights we have about Driftwood. So starting out with just the operations and the state of the company, they have a lot of cash, which is good, right, at this current moment. That's really what you want to see. They have cash, and they have about $823 million of cash on the books right now. I did just a little bit of math. Looks like they're burning about $8 million per month in general administrative costs. And so if you sort of, that's their G&A costs, right? They're obviously burning some cash in their actual drilling operations, but they're generating profit on it as well. But one thing to remember is that they also, they're going to be spending, and very soon, presumably going to be spending $125 million on the Insight acquisition, and maybe $7.5 million additional if gas prices stay high, but presumably they'll have profits to pay for that. So, I figure if you take out the $125 million and take a couple months of G&A, they're probably still sitting on, somewhere in the high $600 million range, right? 680, 690 million, even as of today. Assuming that even today, if they, close the Insight deal today. Hello, Transient Stacker. Welcome to the stream. Let me know if you have any, questions or comments as I'm going along. I'm just going to go over the Tellurian's Q2 earnings report. Quarterly report, I should say. And clearly they're making money. And I'm going to go back to this particular press release that they had, just because it's a little bit easier to look at for the money that they're making. And they had this nice, put a nice chart for you here, right? They made $61.3 million of revenue. They're calling that $53.2 million in EBITDA. I'd want to subtract off the G&A from that, and they all the way down here they had the reconciliation to GAAP. And so you have to basically subtract off, I think, about $9 million for G&A. And so you subtract that off of the 53, and you figure they're actually having about cash flow about $44 million, right? Because depreciation is not quite as much of a, doesn't really matter for the short term. So $44 million in the quarter of cash flow. Again, this is going to presumably, increase with the Insight acquisition. And I think we could probably be looking at, let me see, I did just a tiny bit of math here. If they're going to increase their production, I think by about 40 to 50% as soon as they close that acquisition, somewhere in that vicinity. So I think probably for Q3 we could expect, EBITDA of about 77 million. Maybe that's 68 million of cash flow in the quarter after you subtract off G&A. That's for sort of my rough math, napkin math for what we could see in Q3. So. And that's basically the operations, right? They're scaling up the gas production, as hopefully most of you already expect, and they are ramping that up. And I think they'll probably be, they might even be profitable in Q3 after they close the acquisition on an earnings basis. So, that's pretty good. Now, moving on to Driftwood, right? I had a video just a couple days ago talking about the their SPAs, their sales and purchase agreements for the LNG that they've sold. And the SPAs are still in place. And they have these notes all the way down here at the bottom of the 10Q talking about the amendments that were made to the SPAs, which to me implies that they haven't actually been terminated yet, sort of as I expected them not to be terminated. And I was a little, I'll admit, frustrated to see that the amendments were not extending that date during which it's locked in. So I think as of right now, the buyers could tell Tellurian at basically any point that they want to, terminate the agreement because they're past that sort of lock-in period that they had, at least for the agreements with Vitol and with Shell, right? I think the third agreement with Gunvor had until December 31st of this year for the time period that it was locked in. But they did amend these, and the one thing that I had mentioned was that actually Shell had to have this 45 days in order to terminate it, and they got rid of that provision here with an amendment. And they attached the amendments here. That's not it. This is the amendment with, where's it at? This is with VTOL. The other one's with Shell. They're basically the same if you read through them, and they're more or less the same. The thing that they did with Shell, as I said, was it got rid of that 45-day time window that Shell had to give Tellurian when they're terminating the agreement. So that was not really a favorable thing for Tellurian. But the other thing that they added in, which I am not personally sure what the purpose is, they added in this condition that Tellurian, seller shall give buyer a 5-day prior written notice of seller's estimation of the start of a 5-day window in which the CP fulfillment date is likely to occur. Basically, Tellurian has to give them 5 days notice before they think they're going to actually issue the full notice to proceed, right? Before they're going to meet the CPs, the conditions precedent in the contract. And so, to me, this sound, and again, I am, let me remind you, not a professional, so I don't really have experience in these things, but it sounds to me like this is basically giving them the final, sort of a final deal or no deal for the buyers when Tellurian's saying, hey, we're about to give the full notice to proceed. Do you want to actually continue with this agreement or not? Which was a little bit of a strange thing, I'll admit. So if someone else has more insight into sort of what purpose this would serve, I'd be really curious to hear it. Please leave a comment, giving me your opinion, your thoughts on that. And I don't know, Transient Stacker, if you're still on the stream, if you have any idea what the purpose of this could be, I really don't know. So, I guess the purpose might just be that, they wanted to have this, the Shell and VTOL wanted this in there, and Tellurian had to agree to it in order for them to not terminate. But, I don't know if there's something deeper going on with this. So anyways, that's that. But at least for now, it does appear that the SPAs are still valid and have not been terminated. So at least that's good. And again, I actually don't think that they have any incentive to cancel them, either VTOL or Shell or any of the buyers. But who really knows, right? Companies can make different decisions for different reasons. So the other thing that we see in the 10Q is that Driftwood is still moving along. They spent about $41 million on expenses for Driftwood to progress it during the quarter. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Somewhere right down in here. Driftwood project construction costs. This is the actual cash that they spent in the quarter. Actually, this is for the 6 months. If you subtract off the Q1 numbers, you'll see it's about $41 million for this quarter. And we see that also in the change order to Bechtel. They did extend the scope of the limited notice to proceed. They had this amendment, and they agreed that the definition of the LNTP site, is modified to the one that is exhibit to this change order. They just don't give us that, so we don't have the clear visibility in this, but they are keeping things moving along. And this, I think, this happened in the middle of July, I believe. Yeah, July 15th. So this is a fairly recent that they just extended the scope of that LNTP that Bechtel is now working on. So again, it would be great to know the details there, but we didn't see them. One thing that is not in here, which is not great, we would have really liked to see, was some sort of an extension in the price that is locked in for Driftwood LNG Phase 1, because I think those have expired by this point, and they're not specifically locked in. So we'll have to see how that goes. I'm sure those conversations are happening, but we didn't actually get it with this report. So a couple other things in the report here. They did dilute some more in Q1, but they did so at about $5.80 per share. if we go back up, you can see. I wish I had a better way to scroll through this. Yeah, and I guess the cash flow statement still only shows you the 6 months values, but you can see that they did issue some stock. They got 309 million for the first 6 months. I did the math beforehand, and basically came out with them. The dilution that they did in Q2 was at 580 per share. So I think they actually did a. If you look at the chart, I was looking at the day by day values. If you look at the chart, we'll go for over 6 months and zoom in so that's a little more legible to you. Q2 would have started right around here, right? And so the stock was at 530, and it was really only above that 580 point for the early April, and then it has been below that for the rest of the time. So I think most of the shares that they issued probably were issued early in April, and we're roughly at the peak. You could argue, or you could question what exactly would have happened had they not been adding extra selling pressure at the peak. But hey, at least they're not continuing to dilute now that it's down in the 3s and the 2s. That would really be a red flag for me if they're still diluting at this point after they have $800 million of cash on the books. So that was interesting. And it does actually make me think that if the stock rises back up, we could expect to see more dilution, if the stock goes back up in the high 5s or 6s. So, I mean, overall, the elephant in the room is, the financing for Driftwood, and they really didn't address that in any of their PR around this in the actual release itself. They pretty much were silent on it. And, so there's a lot of uncertainty right now with that. I mean, personally, my thesis is sort of resting on a couple things, right? It's resting on sort of management's experience and management's large holdings in Tellurian and the macro environment, and the fact that Tellurian is not destitute, right? They have some options. They are not, they're not a company that's just burning money and doing nothing else until they finally get the financing in place. I know there's one or two other companies that are in that situation, where they really have no operations to speak of. They're just trying to put together a project and trying to get the money for it. And Tellurian, because they have their gas operations, does have actually, maybe some more ability to be patient, but on the other hand, I would say, the proof is in the pudding, and, we really haven't seen the proof yet at this point, right? We've heard comments earlier on in the year about how things were progressing very well and expectations on financing, and now there's sort of radio silence at this point. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and it does, you can speculate one way or the other, right? If you're bearish, you can speculate that they're not able to get it financed. If you're bullish, you can speculate that they're being patient and negotiating hard and making, great closed door, sort of handshake agreements that we're going to all find out and be super happy about in the future, if you're holding the stock. I don't really know. I think it's a high uncertainty situation, but I actually think, with the company being valued as it is and with the operations that they have, it's a $1.8 billion company, but at the same time, they have sort of net cash of $100 to $200 million, and they're generating, let's call it, after the acquisition, somewhere in the $60 to $70 million per quarter in cash flow. And so the valuation is not so far off just from those operations, and to have sort of the optionality on Driftwood, being priced in there. I think I view this as a, high uncertainty situation. I think the risk maybe is, not so high. Hey, I got some comments. Let's see. Transient Stacker says, Martin, Houston, Suki, and Octavia are going to Milano, Italy for the Gas Tech conference in September. Could there be any significance to this? I'll give you my opinion. I think they've gone to a number of these conferences, and, very rarely have they actually resulted in anything. So personally, no, I don't think that's going to be a big deal. I mean, I could be wrong, right? Announcements have been made once or twice in the past at conferences, but at the same time, as somebody who was in the stock back in 2018 to 2019, they really they were certainly advertising. I heard a lot of folks some of the folks that I talked with about Tellurian way back when online, made a big deal about them going to the conferences, and then nothing really came from those. So surely they're there, and surely there's other folks there, but I don't really have my hopes up for anything specific from the conferences, unfortunately. Ladder. Hi, Ladder. Ladder says, could they be looking to buy another firm? Would that be the move if they wanted to take less loan money to fund Driftwood? To buy another firm, like another gas production firm? Is that what you're asking? I think that's... I certainly think they're looking to acquire more gas, but I don't think that that's going to help them necessarily fund Driftwood. Maybe it would, right? Like there's a credible path if they build up enough gas production and the market can't ignore that, and they start to get valued based off of that, and then they're able to sort of dilute at a higher price and raise the money for Driftwood. It's possible. It's possible then that they like the problem is they need a lot of cash real fast, right? Like if they don't borrow, they need significant assets they can borrow against, and they've already issued the convertible notes that are against all of the a good chunk of their assets in the production company as it exists. And in order for them to actually move on Driftwood, right, it's a lot of money up front. They need to pay Bechtel. They need to have that in place. Like if you read the I could probably open it up real quick while I'm talking. Maybe I couldn't. But like the contracts, the sales and purchase agreements, right, do in order for them to actually get locked in, require Tellurian to issue the full notice to proceed. And the full notice to proceed in the somewhere in here has the sorry, I don't know the sections off the top of my head, but somewhere in here they have to actually say, well, in order to issue to us the full notice to proceed, you have to have the financing in place. You have to have all the money. And again, I don't know the specific details on what their standard is for like showing us that you have all the money and you have the plan for it. So it's possible, but I've always interpreted this as meaning like they need to really have like signed off on the line. Somebody has a liquidity and it says, yes, you have access to this. And, like somebody like a bank will say, yep, you have all the money, when you need it, as Bechtel is doing the work for Driftwood, that we'll just hand you right over the money for that. So I think it's unlikely that they're going to just acquire companies and then fund Driftwood out of that, just at least on their original timeline. It's possible that they could, let's say, renegotiate the timeline with Bechtel and say, well, we're not going to have the cash to build all of Driftwood in the 4 years it's going to take to start shipping LNG in early 2026, but we'll be generating cash at a slower rate, so we'd have to do it over more years. And I haven't heard from the company that's what they want to do. On the flip side, like I do expect sorry, I have let's say a healthy level of uncertainty that is baked into this in terms of like what management's actually doing. Like I still remember the pivot that they did from the equity model where they wanted the buyers to actually buy into Driftwood and fund Driftwood themselves for the equity portion, and they dropped all pretense of that. Now they just did the sales and purchase agreements. And so I guess what I'm saying is management in the past has actually pivoted and sort of just did that and didn't really acknowledge it very much. They just kind of changed their minds and went a different direction. And it's possible they could be doing that now with how they are funding things, and we would find out once they kind of have some agreements in place. So it's a possibility. But I think to answer your question more succinctly, Ladder, like I don't know that helps, right? Because I think they need a lot of money quickly in order to actually meet the standard for, hey, we can start Driftwood because we've got all this access to the money up front. All right, Transient Stacker asks, what would you estimate the time limit for getting the funding by is? So there is a recent video, and I have been meaning to go back through it. There's I don't have a good answer for you off the top of my head. I do intend to re-look into this. I haven't had the time recently. I've been super busy, and I apologize for that. But there was a video from it was posted on the Reddit. Let me see if I can. Let me go to my other tab. Let me see if I can find this real quick. There's a video from somebody who is actually in the industry, does not work at Tellurian, at least said that they don't work at Tellurian, but had a fairly detailed video about sort of the what could progress, how far they could go before they're actually delaying the shipping of LNG by not having financing. And they talked about the activities at the site and the pile driving and what all would need to happen before basically Bechtel would be sitting around and waiting because Tellurian hasn't issued the full notice to proceed. And that's all just sort of like their best understanding. Somebody who is in the industry and had their best understanding of how the process works. They didn't have specific insight into the Driftwood project, right? Because it's possible that they are seeing a way that they're able to continue on with a couple limited notice to proceeds here and there with a couple $100 million here and a couple $100 million there to at least get things moving. And maybe they could do that for I have to imagine maybe up to like a year would be the longest possible time frame, right? Meaning like sometime in mid 2023. At that point, sooner or later, they're gonna just be like, okay, Bechtel needs a bunch of money to hire all the people to do all this stuff to actually keep things on schedule. But I meant to look back through that. I will add the link in the description after this video. Or maybe I can find it right now. Hi, Wakaza. I just basically finished everything that I was talking through today. I'm gonna look for that video real quick. Tellurian LNG. I know that it was posted on the subreddit. Let's see. Give me just a moment. I'm gonna try this month, last month. There we go. This is the video here. This is the video if you saw it, so maybe this will give you the channel and video title. Nice haircut. Thanks. Thank you, Wakaza. Now, this is an ad. But this is a video. It's by Green Bay 2023.
Greetings.
What should construction look like in 2022? And again, this is the video that I watched it through once, and I need to watch it through again with my sort of pen and paper out to actually digest this, because this person knows a lot more than me about the specifics of the industry, right? I think I've mentioned many, many times, I'm not an insider in the industry at all, right? I work in software, so everything I know about LNG is just sort of what I've picked up over time. So this is, if you want to sort of form your own opinion, this is it. I do intend to go through here and sort of try to form a solid opinion, and if I have enough to talk about on a video, I will. If not, then I'm not gonna waste y'all's time. But this is the best source that I found for trying to answer that question of how long do we think they can go without having the full financing in place. So. All right, ladder. Last question from me. Shoot, what is it? By the way, thanks for all the great comments, great questions. I really appreciate having y'all on here. It's great. I think I'm probably enjoying this the most of everybody, which is fantastic. I hope y'all are enjoying it too. Last question from me. Still waiting on that. I think I got the delay down a bit on here. Transient Stacker says, I post some of your videos there. I hope that's cool with you. Absolutely. Feel free to post my videos wherever. I don't usually, just my personal policy right now is I don't usually post them because I don't really know what people are going to find useful or not useful. But if you find something interesting or useful, feel free to post the videos, wherever. I have absolutely no qualms with that. I take that as a signal that somebody actually finds my stuff interesting and useful. All right, Ladder says, in terms of their peers trying to export LNG, are they keeping pace or wildly behind? If you have any info on that. I mean, you can clearly say they're behind, the companies who've reached their final investment decisions, right? And there's been a handful of those, and a lot of those have been, a lot of the ones that I've seen, I don't keep tabs on the whole industry. I just don't have time for doing it, although I do my best. But I think, a lot of those are existing facilities that have expanded, right? And those are pretty clear slam dunks. And I think it's easier for them to sort of move forward with some of those. Um, I think, if you're comparing it to a couple of the projects that I've looked at because they're investable and they're early. Like Next Decade is a big one. Obviously, I know a lot of people look at that, and I think they're roughly on par with them, maybe a little bit behind. It's hard to say, right? I think, as I said before, it's in a high uncertainty situation where, if you'd asked me 6 months ago, or let's say even 3 months ago, more to the point, like, do I think the company would be in the situation they are now, I'd say, like, no. I definitely would have thought they would had at least some major announcements on financing, if not the whole thing wrapped up in the FID, the decision already made. So there is some, you do have to be skeptical and ask some questions of the company and of yourself and your belief in the company on, is there some reason why they haven't gotten financing yet? Right? That's really the big question that as an investor you have to worry about. But I mean, are they behind? Like, it's hard to say, right? Because there's so many things that need to fall into place for the companies to be successful. And one of the things that they have a leg up on some of the other ones is, they've done the full process before, right? Management has actually been involved, not just putting together the project and signing the papers and the financing, but then actually managing the project overall. As time goes on, because I know a lot of that is obviously in Bechtel's court, but some of it is in managing it, and some of it is in managing the upstream and all of those sorts of things. And again, I still think part of what makes Tellurian so interesting is they're planning to that their contracts are priced off of JKM and TTF, whereas other companies are not, and so maybe the timing of whether they reach their FID now versus, hypothetically 6 months from now, or whether they delay the terminal, by 6 months because they were doing who knows what with the financing, right? We really just don't have insight into that. They may end up still being wildly more profitable than many of these other companies because of the pricing structure of their contracts. So that's, it's certainly risk, and that risk could go either way. But when I look at the macro environment, as I've talked about a couple different times on my channel, I have some videos on the LNG market overall, that I just see that being, I don't see those prices going down. I see them probably going up if I just look over the years long period. That's obviously with the caveat that, if we get abundant energy from some other new technology, or nuclear really starts developing, then there's clearly there's clearly risks. But I think just with the trajectory that we're on, over a reasonable time frame, midterm, like 5 to 10 years, like, it certainly seems that Tellurian has the right model, if they can actually get to the point where they're exporting LNG. Sorry, that was a long monologue. I apologize. Wakaza says price per barrel is now $88, and some companies are slowly starting production. Hopefully, price per gallon will go lower in the near future, especially in Hawaii. We need it. $4.58 per gallon right now in Oahu. Yeah, absolutely, and I had a video talking about this, but I think natural gas is a very interesting, commodity, just because in order to, like, it's harder to ship, right, than oil, I think. And that's obviously the major benefit in the power of these liquefied natural gas export companies, and import on the other side. They can actually economically ship the gas. But I think that's the really interesting thing, is that we don't have such a glut of capacity where we can just add some incremental capacity and, hey, the whole globe is happy again, we're back in balance, right? Like, there's a small fraction of the total gas in the world that is covered by liquefaction capacity. And especially with the situation in Europe, I think that's that's a big again a big plus for the macro factor, or from the macro perspective for LNG prices. Transient Stacker says some think the 10-year contracts are the problem getting financing. Yeah, I think that's definitely a factor. I was a little I had a bit of hope that they might amend some of these sales and purchase agreements to be longer term. We clearly didn't see that happen, and we'll see how things progress. I do think that's a major problem, right? I think it's both that and it's their pricing, the pricing index. And as I said, like from my perspective, I have an opinion on what I think the price of TTF and JKM is going to how that's going to go over time. And so from my biased perspective, I think it's a positive for Tellurian, right? But if I'm a bank, I look at it from the bank's perspective. You're taking on a commodity risk there. You're taking on the risk of the person who has to pay you back the money that you loaned out to Tellurian. You're taking the risk that LNG prices are going to be high, right? And so, as opposed to some of the other companies that have the, what I think is a quote unquote standard pricing of, just a tolling model, right? Where I think that's what they call it is, you're going to pay us a fixed fee for us doing the liquefaction. From the bank's perspective, that's incredibly low risk because their cash flows are very, very predictable. They're going to get that fee. In Tellurian, what cash flows are they going to have? Well, that's the difference between, JKM and TTF and what Tellurian's costs are. And that's even a harder thing to predict if their costs are dependent on, Henry Hub gas prices and whatever those float at, as opposed to their full stated strategy of, hey, let's produce our own gas so that we control all those costs, and Henry Hub can go to $1 million, and we don't care because we're only paying our costs, not the Henry Hub. But they don't have all that gas. They don't have all that upstream. So I think it is both the 10-year contracts and it's the pricing, and it just there's a lot of risk, and I think that's again, it's speculation, but it does seem like that's hard for a bank to sort of analyze the worst case and say, well, we're comfortable with that, right? I think there's a larger, I think you'd call it like a larger tail risk on them versus other companies that are going to be very, very predictable because their cash flows are written into the contracts, basically. Well, Kaza says, the LNG coming this winter season on the mainland in terms of need and price will be telling. I think it will be a higher demand. Yeah, absolutely, right. And I think you just look at Europe is that's the big thing that happened this year, and I'm going to be super like when I read some of the articles, I am worried at what that's going to look like in Europe as they scramble for gas, and some of that is going to have to come from LNG just because there aren't pipelines, right? And so I think that's going to affect the LNG market as a whole overall in the short term. The short term meaning like the next year or so. I think if you look years and years out, like that's certainly not priced into the market that's going to be a major factor, but it could be. That effect could persist for a couple of years. We don't know, and that's why partly why there's major uncertainty around what are the cash flows for Tellurian going to be, in 2026, 2027 and beyond, because some of these effects are assumed to not last that long, but we'll see. Wow, this is a long stream. Thanks for all the chat on here, the discussion. I love it. Yeah. If there's nothing else, though, I think I'm probably going to hop off and go to bed. It is 1 a.m. and I got to work tomorrow. I stayed up a little late tonight to do this video, but hey, I had fun. I hope you all had fun too. Let's see if there's anything else in the chat. For anyone else who happens to be watching this after the fact, I'll give you my normal little speech. I do these videos live, usually late in the evenings on whatever evenings I can fit it in Eastern US time, somewhere not usually earlier than 9 p.m., sometimes much later, as tonight was after midnight. Yeah, All right. While Kaza says mahalo, Dustin, thanks for everything. Don't forget Nightscope. Probably my next stream will be on Nightscope unless there's some major event I want to cover. Because yes, I think Nightscope has had some super interesting announcements recently, and that's like next on my list. One of my other favorite companies that I'm invested in. So Transient Stacker says, hope they have financing by the next video. That would be fantastic. Yeah, if they have some surprise announcement and they have financing, I think things are going to be super interesting with the stock with the major short interest that's open right now, and yeah, that would be fine. That would be fantastic. I'll have a nice celebration stream with y'all. We can drink some champagne or something, I guess. And Ladder says, thank you for all your efforts in these videos. Absolutely. Thank you for hopping on and sharing some time with me in the discussion. I had fun. I hope you had fun. So, all right, I will hop off now. Thank you very much, everyone.